In this video I will show you how to create these sword trails in Blender so that the sword swings of your character will look way better. I got this Mixamo rig with this animation on it. The sword, I got that from Sketchfab. You have a link in the description so that you can check that out. And now let's get started with creating the sword trail. So I recommend that you go to frame 1, the first frame of your animation. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put this armature in a T-pose so that it's easier to connect this trail to the armature. So let's do that by clicking on the armature, go over here into the object data properties and set this in rest position so that it goes in T-pose. From here, let's press numpad 7 to go into top view and let's press Shift A to insert a plane. This plane, we're going to move it over here. And then we're going into edit mode by pressing tab. Once you've done that, you make sure that you have selected all the vertices and you press S to scale the plane down. From here, let's press Alt Z so that we can see through every object. And let's move these vertices with G and Y to make the plane a nice width. We're going to make this plane a bit longer. Of course, later you're going to have control over how long the trail is going to be, but to make it a little bit easier for us to create it now, we're going to make it a bit longer by selecting these vertices and pressing G and X. And make it kind of like this. That's good enough. In order to be able to bend this plane, we want to cut the plane a few times. We want to add in 3 loop cuts. So let's press Ctrl R and let's scroll on our mouse wheel until we get 3 loop cuts. Then let's press left click and right click to put them perfectly centered. From here, let's go out of edit mode back into object mode by pressing tab. And let's press numpad 1 to go into front view. And then you see the plane is still on the ground. So let's press G and Z and move it up. If you press Alt Z, you can have a better view of where the plane is. We want to put this plane perfectly in the middle of the blade. To add in an armature, which is going to control the shape of this trail. And we want to add in that armature not just over there, but it's easier if we add it in like between these 2 vertices. So if you go into edit mode and then select those 2 vertices, you can press Shift S and do cursor to selected so that the 3D cursor will go between those 2 vertices. From here, if you go out of edit mode back into object mode and you press Shift A to add in an armature single bone, or just armature. If you don't have the Rigify add-on, then you're getting a bone on that place. Now what we want to do is edit this armature so that we have for each loop cut that this plane has, we've got a bone. So here a bone, here a bone, here a bone, here a bone. And we want that the bones are perfectly aligned with the loop cuts that we added in. You will see if you go into edit mode for this armature, and you move this, you see with your bare hands, that's going to be very hard to do. So what we could do is use the snapping tool. If you turn that on and then open the pop-up, you can turn it on edge center. So that when you move this part and you move it over here, it will perfectly snap it to the center of this edge. From here, it's simply a matter of extruding a few times. So 1, 2, and 3. And then you have the perfect armature, which is perfectly aligned with the plane. So now if we take a look for the armature in pose mode, then we can see, okay, good, we can rotate it. However, the plane is not following the armature yet. So let's do that now. Let's parent the plane to the armature. And we're going to do that by first clicking on the plane in object mode and then shift click on the armature, press Ctrl P and do set parent to armature deform, but with empty groups, so that it will parent it to the armature, but without any weights. So that, and let me show you, if you do this, now it's moving along in object mode, but if you go into pose mode, it's not moving along yet because the individual vertices are not assigned to each bone. That's what we're going to do now. So go back into object mode and go into edit mode for the plane. Let's go into numpad 7 and Alt Z, makes it a bit easier. You see, when we parented the plane to the bones, we got vertex group over here. The vertex groups are linked to each bone. So we have bone, that's the first one, bone 001 is this one, 002 this one, 003 is this one. If we now say, okay, these vertices should move along with bone, then we can click on bone vertex group and click on assign. We want to say that these vertices move along with bone 002, we click on assign. These with 002, assign, and the last one 003, assign. And now if you go out of edit mode and back into pose mode for the armature, then you will see it moves along. And from the top, you can see you can determine like in what direction the trail goes. Later this video we're going to optimize this rig so that we have a lot of control over like the rotation of this and the scaling. But now let's take a look first at the texture of it. Let's actually create that trail texture. So to create the texture, let's go into object mode and then click on the armature and let's go into render view mode. Okay, to create the texture, we go into numpad 7 and let's go into the shader editor, and I like to split my screen in half for that. So let's go over here until you have those two arrows, press right click and do vertical split, and then go to the middle and click left click. This view, let's make that the shader editor. So let's go over here and change it to shader editor. If you press N, this field will go away so that you have more room for the nodes. Let's click on new over here to insert a new material. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the principal BSDF. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a mask that filters out the edges of the plane. And we're going to do that with Shift A, search for gradient texture. And if you connect that with the material output, then you see there's a gradient from there to there. But we kind of want to have a round gradient. So we set this from linear to spherical. Now you see the sphere goes like this. We want to reposition the sphere. So if you have the Node Wrangler add-on, you can click on the gradient texture and press Ctrl T to add in a texture coordinate and a mapping node. And with this mapping node, you can change the location of it. And if you do the Y location, then you can put it in the middle. You can also change the scaling. And if you change the Y scaling, you will see you make it thinner. And while you make it thinner, you also want to adjust the Y location. We want that this thing is all noisy, so that it becomes really like a trail. So to do that, we're going to manipulate the vector coordinates that go from the mapping node into the gradient texture with a noise texture. So let's press Shift A and search for noise texture. And this noise texture, if you press Ctrl Shift click to connect it with the material output, looks like this. If you also press Ctrl T for a texture coordinate and a mapping node for this one, then later we have more control over what this looks like. Let's combine these two together with a mix node. And this mix node, we set this from float to color and also from mix to multiply, because we want to multiply it with each other. And we want to multiply the value of this mapping node with the value of this noise texture and connect the multiply node with the vector of the gradient texture. And then let's see what the color looks like. Looks like this. If you now play around with the vector, you will see the less vector you have, the more it looks like the original gradient. The more vector you have, the more it becomes a noisy gradient. And you see you might want to adjust the scaling of the Y with this again. And maybe also the X. From here, if you also take the noise texture, in the mapping node of the noise texture, set the Y axis higher, then you see you're getting more like flat noise, and then it really looks like a trail. And if you set the original scaling of the noise texture lower, then you're getting noise like this. And if you set the detail lower to 0, you can set that to 0, then it looks like that. And by the way, let's set this vector of the multiply all the way to 1, so that we're getting the best result out of this. Then adjust the mapping node a little bit, and then you really see you're getting something that looks like this. And then these are the final values that I went with. Maybe in your case, different values will look better, but that's just something that you have to play around with in order to find the right values that fit your purpose. Now let's try to give this thing that cartoony, shiny look to it. And we're going to do that by changing this gradient texture with a color ramp. And for this color ramp, we want to add in more joints between this black and white value. So let's click on plus, then let's click on plus again. Then make sure that you're first clicking on the white part and then plus to add in one over here. From here, what we want to do is we want to set this from linear to constant, so that it goes in constant ways from one color to the other. Then you see you're already getting this effect. If you're now going to play around with these values, then you will see you can create something that looks pretty cool, like this for example. Now in order to make this any color that you like, you want to press Shift A and search for a mix node again. If you then do float to color, you can set this over here. You want to set the color ramp on color B. You want to multiply any color A by this color ramp color B, because you want to darken that color. each time it gets to a new layer. So go from mix to multiply. Set the factor all the way to 1, and now you can take any color that you like and choose something cool. I will go for this one. Although this is already looking pretty cool, I think it would be better if the black part is transparent, right? So let's do that. Let's move the material output a bit out of the way, and we want to press Shift A to insert a transparent BSDF. And we also want to import an emission BSDF, because these parts have to emit light at some point, so we're going to make this an emission. We want to mix these two together, so let's add in a mix shader node. And let's connect the transparent BSDF to here and the emission to there. We want to create a new mask for the factor of the mix shader so that we can perfectly tell where should it be transparent, where should it be not transparent. We want to do this with a new color ramp. Let's press Shift A and add in a new color ramp. And we're going to use the gradient texture again. So let's connect that with here. We then Ctrl Shift click on the color ramp. See, we have it like this. Well, let's connect this with the mix shader and Ctrl Shift click on it. Then we're getting this, right? Let's actually make the color of the emission the multiply node like this, so that we have the original one back. Obviously, we don't see transparency now because we are in Eevee. To make transparency work in Eevee, you have to go over here into the material properties and change some settings in the material properties. The settings that you have to change is under settings, blend mode, set this to alpha hashed. Then it will become transparent. To make the borders between transparent and not transparent like harsh, let's set this color ramp from linear to constant, and let's then drag the white part all the way to the left until you get this black part over here, and we can actually take that with us. The only thing that we have to do to make this look good is to make in the multiply node, set the factor not on 1 but a little bit lower to make it like this blue tint, maybe even a little bit lower, like this. Yes. If you wanted that it emits even more light, of course you can set the emission strength to a higher value. I prefer like 30, something like that. Okay, that might be too much. Let's set it on 10. Yeah, that's good. Just play around with it and see what works the best for you. And in the end, this is the whole node setup. So feel free to take a screenshot or something like that, or pause the video so that you can take notes or do everything the same as I have. Of course, you don't need to do the same thing as I have, because you might have a different situation in which other values look way better. So that is it for the texture. We're not going to need the texturing anymore, so I'm going to press right click over here and I do join areas so that we can get away from the shader editor. Let's take a look again at the armature, because there are some things that I want to fix to it. We go into top view, numpad 7, and we go into pose mode for it by pressing Ctrl Tab. As you see, if you rotate this part, you see the texture is getting all messed up, right? Simple way to fix this is to add in a subdivision surface modifier so that your mesh becomes smoother. So let's do that. If you go into object mode and you click on the mesh, let's go into modifier properties, add modifier subdivision surface, and add in a level of viewport of 3, something like that, maybe 2. Then you see it gets smoothed out a bit too much on this end. We can just add in some supportive loop cuts by going into edit mode, by pressing Ctrl R over here, and move it to there, and then another one right over there. You might also want to turn off the snapping tool for now, but let's put it over there. And then you will see the traits are looking very smooth. Right, let's go back into pose mode for the armature, and I'm going to remove all these rotations by selecting everything and pressing Alt R so that everything becomes its original rotation again. I want to have control over this rig as easy as possible. So what we can do is we can make it that if we rotate this bone, that this bone and this bone automatically also rotate. And we can do that by adding in constraints to these two bones. So let's do this bone first. So let's click on the bone and let's go over here in the bone constraint properties. And then go to add bone constraint and do copy rotation. The target is going to be this armature. Then the bone, the specific bone, is going to be 001. So let's click on that in the bone, and now you will see if you rotate it, it doesn't do anything yet. That's because in the target and the owner, it's now on world space, and we have to set this on local space, both of them. So that now if you rotate it, you see this one rotates in the same way. Now we want to copy this constraint over to this one. So let's click on this one, shift click on bone 002, go to the copy rotation, click on this pop-up and do copy to selected. And now if you only select this one and you rotate it, you see you have fully control over the direction of this trail. The reason why we are not copying the rotation from this one over to this one is because this bone, we don't want to rotate that one. Because look, if we rotate this one, yeah, you're getting this. That's not what you want. You only want to rotate this bone. Now, obviously, it's never going to be the case that the trail is always visible. So how do we make it disappear in a smooth way? Well, we're going to do that with this bone, with the scaling of this bone. If you press N and you go into item over here, then you're having for this bone the Y scale. And you see the smaller you make this, the smaller the object becomes. If you set this on 0, then the object is completely gone. And to inset a keyframe for this, so to animate it, you can hover with your mouse over it and press I. Then you can go, for example, to frame 20 and set the Y on 1. And then if you hover with your mouse over it again, you can set Y, so that you're having 2 keyframes. If you now play the animation, you see you can make the trail appear. This way later, when we're going to match it up with the actual animation of the character, we're going to have an easy time with like timing when the trail should show up and when it should disappear. So let's do that now. Let's animate this. Let's make it matching up with our animation. So if we click on this armature, if we put it from rest position back into pose position, oh no, then we see the trail is not connected to the armature yet. So we have to do that first. So let's put it back into rest position. And what we want to do is we want to parent this armature from the trail to the sword. So let's click on the armature, shift click on the sword, Control P and do set parent to object. And now if you click on the other armature, the human armature, and you do pose position, then you will see it will start moving along and it looks like this. Yeah, this doesn't really look so good, of course, because we have to animate it. Let's do that. Before we start animating, let's actually go into pose mode and go to a frame in which you have the trail like this. Then let's press A to select all the bones and let's actually delete all the keyframes so that we're starting from fresh. So let's from here, let's go into one of the slices that it's doing. For example, I think for now the easiest one is the second one, so this one. Yes, I'm going to do this slice. So the easiest way to animate this is to go into the frame in which the slice is halfway through it. So I think it's this, yeah, this frame. And on this frame, we want to make the trail look good. So let's do that by first inserting a keyframe for the scaling on this one. So let's click on this bone, go into the scale, press I, okay? Now we want to change the rotation of this bone so that we can make it like this. So let's do that by pressing R, and we want to rotate this on the local axis of this thing, the local X-axis, so that we can do it like this. And to rotate it over the local X-axis, you want to press R and then X. That does it on the global axis. If you press X again, then it will switch to the local axis. And then make it kind of like this, so that it goes like a swing. And from here, you can press I and insert a rotation keyframe for this bone. Let's see what that looks like. Looks like that. Okay, the swing already looks good. Now we just have to animate the scaling of this bone. So let's see. Okay, go to the beginning frame where the sword is starting. So I think over here. On this frame, the Y scaling of this one should be 0. So let's click on it and click on the Y over here and click 0 so that we don't have any trail. And then if you go Y to insert a keyframe, then you will see it will appear. Then over here at the end, it should disappear again. So we go over here to the end and we make the Y-axis 0 and we press I to insert a keyframe, and then this is the animation that we're getting. Pretty cool. I will set the start frame on 45, and then for the third and last swing, you go frame by frame, you go there, okay, and then from here we set a keyframe for the Y again, so I, so that the scale of that bone is like this. Then you go a few frames further, over here, like the middle of that slice, and then go click Y, make it 1 so that the trail will appear, I, and then go further to the end, and then make it 0, and then I, and then this is the animation. So now you know how to create easy sword tails in Blender. Hope you learned something today. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions about things in the tutorial, just leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss out for any future videos. And with that being said, I see you in the next video.